Hey, how's it going? So I'm going to try something new here with lap comparison in Virtual Racing School. I've got Rob Alleged to check. I hope I didn't butcher your name too much there, man. He volunteered to send me a lap in VRS so that we could compare. What we did is we ran laps in similar track temperature, real close here, and he sent me the best lap on that, and I'm going to compare that to mine, and we're going to just go through some of the areas here where time is lost and talk about why and how an adjustments could be made to help reduce the amount of time lost. So if you're new to VRS, it's free to sign up to. It'll automatically record your sessions. You can upload replays and whatnot to it. Cool little analysis tool with your telemetry. So I'd recommend trying it out. It's definitely been helpful for me to analyze areas of a track or sectors of a track where I need to work on. So what you can see here is we've just got a lap representation for Sebring, and it's broken up into sectors here for where time is lost from one comparison to the other. So what we've got is basically about 2.439 seconds difference between my lap and Rob's, and I'm going to go through, see how many I can get through here. I don't know how long this is going to take, just kind of doing this spur of the moment, so I'm not sure how long this will take to go through. But what we can do is we can click on the sectors here where the time is lost, and if you zoom out you can see exactly where that is. That's right around the turn 3 to 4 position of the map, and this is where most time is lost, so we'll look at that one first, and let's zoom in and see exactly what's different. So, ideally I'd have these replays side by side so you could visually see as well. Kind of tricky to do to get all that set up and time consuming to get that set up. So for now I'm just mostly going to use the little visual representation here in VRS to show what's happening differently. So what we have here, the ones that I've chosen to compare here, the amount of speed that's carried through the line I think is important. You're going to see about a 6 to 7 mile per hour difference here. You're also going to see difference in line, how far Rob's line will vary or differ from my own line. And then also braking points is obviously key, and throttle points. So steering angle, may talk about that just a little bit. I'm not an expert on proper terminology to use for VRS here, so hopefully this is easy to follow. All right, so let's go ahead and start at the start of this at corner entry. So the biggest difference here is you can see that the line differs quite a bit on corner entry. Just to give you a visual representation here, this is the corner entry that I have from my recorded lap guide, and what I can see is that he's not using all of the track as far as like getting the car over to the right hand side here, and that's affecting his line and how much speed he can carry through the corner. And so as we kind of play through this, you can see the distance there and the turn-in point. The other thing you can see is that braking points are actually quite a bit different, and he brakes harder. Mine is the blue, and Rob's is the purple dotted line. So what you can see here is my braking point is happening a bit sooner, and I'm not actually braking as hard. Looks like I'm only doing about 18% braking, and he's braking later and harder. So he's scrubbing off more speed, and he's off the ideal line. So that's the biggest difference, and I think from that point forward, and as I explained in my lap guide, that's where you kind of one part of the corner will throw off the remaining parts of the corner, and you want to be able to carry as much speed through this and out of it because you're coming out onto a long straightaway after that. So you can actually see how much time is lost here. Now, going into the corner, he's down about a half a second, so that's from prior parts of the track. So this is a little out of order in the way that we're showing. They're shown in the order of time lost overall, so that might be a little confusing. But as we get through this sector, it starts at about 0.5 down, and then you can see as we go through the corner, time is now gradually lost all the way through the straight. And the reason for that is just not setting up the corner and carrying enough speed through the corner. So I think that's pretty straightforward. Really, the key there is to get the car set up on the right-hand side, brake a little sooner, and I'm actually getting off throttle a little sooner as well. Steering angle is different because of the different line. And these blips here where I'm off throttle, I lift my throttle when I shift. I think he just hits the clutch. You can do either way. In fact, you'll see, yeah, there's his clutch right there where he's shifting. I don't know if it's necessarily faster one way or another. I've heard comments that you can keep the turbo spooled up if you just clutch on upshift, but I don't think I'm losing time by just lifting the throttle on upshift. And I just personally can't stand the way that it sounds to to not lift the throttle on upshift in the car. It sounds like transmission won't take much of it. And obviously it doesn't hurt the car, it doesn't hurt the transmission, but in the real world it would. So that's what you're seeing there where I'm lifting my throttle on the upshift. So up here, this is interesting to me because this shows that because of my early braking, you can see I'm actually going slower, and the difference right here because of my early braking leaves me off by about 12 mile per hour right here. That's how much of a difference in speed in the different braking zone. And then as we cross right here where we're carrying about the same amount of speed, you can see we're about the same speed in the same point of the track here, but then it will overlap, and my line out of the corner is much tighter, and because it's tighter I can get on throttle just a little sooner. Not a whole lot sooner, but I think the key is the amount of speed carried. So what you can see is about 4 mile per hour here, and I'm just looking at right here, these two numbers compared. Through the apex of the corner and out of the corner, we're going from about 5 to 6 to 7 or so miles per hour. So the amount of speed carried through the corner is probably the biggest difference of the I don't know, the biggest evidence of the approach to the corner and how that can affect how much speed you can carry through. So that's this corner here. And again, I don't have his lap to pull up in video side by side, but the difference is that he starts his corner entry not quite out to the right, on the far right here. He brakes a little later, misses the apex a little bit, so he's a little wider on apex. Can't carry as much speed because if he tried to carry as much speed, he's going to go off here. So he has to actually go a little slower because of the result of the line. And then this is the point where there's about a 6 to 7 mile per hour speed difference. So that's the sector where most amount of time is. Let's take a look at number 11 here, where we got 3.4 seconds lost. This is Sunset Bend. So let's take a look, zoom in on that, see what we can see here. So it looks like I'm starting once again a little wider. So he may just not be using all of the track there on corner entry. And then of course that affects how much speed you can carry as well. And let's play through. So his braking is actually a little later. He's getting good brake threshold braking for what I found to be about, looks like it was about, what was it, 60%. He's getting to 60% just a tad later. And let's play through. So there's a big difference in the line. So he starts shallower on the line, and then he's actually running wider on the line. And he's actually not using all of the track out on exit as well. So right here, as I look at the difference in speed that's carried, this is where I see a pretty big gap. So he may be over braking. Although he hits threshold braking, he doesn't trail off quite as quickly. So he's probably over slowing the car a little bit. And as we get past the braking zone and we start to get closer to the mid corner point, again we're looking at about a 7 mile per hour difference in speed, and that just the different amount of speed that's being carried through that corner is making or is accounting for a lot of the time that's being lost. He's getting to throttle sooner, and he's got a nice gradual input in throttle and getting up to full throttle. This is the point where I get to full throttle a little too early and have to actually lift back off. But let's take a look here in the lap. Jump forward. Okay, so here's Sunset Bend coming up. All right, so right at this point, this is where we see the difference in the entry line, where he's just a little shallow there. And this is really right at the turn-in point. You can see our lines are both turning in, so it's really right about here. So he's probably turning in just a little early there and not carrying as much speed and over slowing the car just a little bit. Now it's interesting because at this point his wide actually goes wider. He actually runs the wider line of the two. As we get to that point, so he's coming a little wider, and he's actually not carrying as much speed at that point. So he actually could be carrying quite a bit more speed, and the car would carry more speed there. But I think what he's doing is he's overslowing the car in preparation for the apex to get back on throttle, and it's really just a matter of finding the limits of the car, and you really have to exceed them. Sometimes you have to exceed the limit to find it. Very easy to do in a simulator, not so easy to do in the real world because of the damage and the costs that would occur there. But the wider line also takes longer. So when you run a wider line, it takes longer to traverse the distance. So if you can shorten up a line and run a shallower line and carry more speed, I'm actually running a shallower line and more speed, so the combination of the two is actually fairly significant. All right, so let's look at the next one. 3/10 on this sector. So this is turn one. Let's take a look here, and let's zoom in on the line. All right, so in this example, Rob's actually running a wider line, and he is actually braking less. But so he's actually, this is interesting, he's braking less, but he's actually carrying less speed. So why is that? Let's go back. Now, before we even get to the braking point, he's a little down on speed. That's a result of Sunset Bend. The speed you carry out of Sunset Bend obviously is going to carry on down the straight. So as we get to the point of braking, he's easing into the brake pedal. So what you've got here is a gradual easing in and then easing off. And you want to avoid that if you can. The less amount of time that you spend slowing the car, the better off. And so I've got a real quick, efficient brake input and release here, where I'm actually braking harder, but in a shorter amount of time. And there's a pretty significant difference in speed. Right there, you've actually got about 4.5 miles per hour. And then on throttle, my inputs are I've got a lot more throttle through the corner. They're a little bit irregular, but I think Rob's focus here is being smooth. He's trying to be real smooth on the brake and off the throttle. And what you've got to do, I think, sometimes is again, find the limit, push the limit to find out how much throttle you can actually give. He could get away with more throttle and carrying more speed. Now this is, I don't know if this is on the exact same setup. I did send him the setup, so I think it is the same. Yeah, I think we're running the identical setup too. We should be. I did send it to him, and I didn't modify it since then, so I think that's correct. And how do I collapse this? I don't know how to collapse. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I know the car can carry more speed through there, and it really is a matter of just finding what that threshold is, what the car can handle. So let's look at the line as we go through the corner. He's running wider, and let's look at the apex point. I think it's really hard to tell where apex is exactly. So I'm actually turning in sooner. He's running wider. We cross over probably right around where the apex is. I'm guessing it's right around this point right here. I mean, if I zoom out, I think that's probably right around where that cone is on the fence. And what's happened here is he's actually not using all of the track out on the exit of the corner either. And so as we come to the exit of the corner, you can see the purple line on the inside is not running as wide as he could be. Because I know I'm right. I think my line's at the limit. I think I'm on the limit of the track right there. And as we come on the exit, this is right up where we get right up to the curbing on an exit. And so he could carry more speed and he could run wider. And the big difference here you can see through this graph here is the amount of speed carried through that corner. 10 mile per hour difference right there actually. And that might be the apex right around there. So that's the significant difference here. So it's a pretty common theme with the comparison here is just the amount of speed at mid corner, carrying more speed through the corner. Throttle, let's see here. It looks like I'm getting back to full throttle sooner. Between this point here is where he gets to full throttle. So it looks like he could actually be just a little more efficient with throttle and really use the throttle to help carry more speed and find where that limit is. And you may spin and crash a few times, so that's fine. That's why it's a sim. So find where that limit is and then develop some muscle memory on the braking and throttle inputs, and then you'll carry more speed through that corner. All right, so let's look at the next one, 3/10 on this sector. So all right, so this is actually an odd place to lose time. And I wonder if it's because of the exit that he had on the corner here. 3/10 through here. So this is corner number, Cunningham corner. Zoom in on the line. His line is a little shallow on entry. And let's look at the break point. So at break point, the big difference in break point is again a little more gradual entry on brake and not quite reaching the level of threshold braking that the car can do here. So threshold braking is about 70. Well, it may be even more than this, but in my case it was 73%ish. And he didn't quite get that far, and he was more gradual on. So he spent a little more time slowing the car and not as efficient slowing of the car. So there's a difference in the amount of speed that's carried at that point at braking. So he's actually overslowing the car and not doing it in as short amount of time as could be. Nice and smooth off the brakes there. The difference here, once we're starting to get off the brake, there's actually going to be a little bit of an overlap in speed, and I think it's because he may be apexing just a little earlier and not carrying as much speed out of the corner. Yeah, he is a little shallow there on the line. So I think he's let me back up a little bit. Yeah, what he's doing is he's apexing a little earlier and he's coming out wide, whereas I'm actually starting wider. I'm sorry, I'm getting the two mixed up. I actually apex sooner. Sorry about that. So I'm the blue line. I ran a shallower line there. I apex sooner, and I ran wider as I carried more speed around the corner. And that's the difference right there. The key, I think, is in the brake. So as we start here, as we get to the braking zone, there's about a mile per hour difference, and of course that'll be a result of the prior corner. But as we get to the braking zone, I'm trying to pinpoint. I wish I could see these side by side in the video, in the replay video, and I could do that, but the setup time to do it is just so much time to get everything synchronized that way. I'm going to pull it up here in just one view. A little before that. Okay. All right, so we're approaching the corner in question. Okay, so here's the braking zone that we're talking about here. Let's go back to that. And then as we start to come off brakes, I'm actually turning in sooner. You can see the steering angle difference here. So see as we come off brakes here. So I'm actually turning in a little sooner. I like that he's running a little wide and going for a late apex, because it is a late apex. But I think what's happened is he's probably just gone a little too wide and he couldn't get back to the apex and back on throttle quite as soon. Let's see here. Yeah, so no, he didn't run as wide. He ran shallow. So what he did is, I think his line is solid, but he's running wide. He's hitting a late apex, and he's staying. I actually ran wider than him as I was carrying more speed there. But there's a point here where I actually get back on throttle just a little bit sooner. And as I'm getting on throttle, we're about the same speed right here. He's slightly faster, actually. So he's carrying more speed out of the exit of the corner. And then on corner exit, my speed starts to pull ahead here. And that's actually going into the next corner, where it's very difficult to get back to full throttle. And it's just as you come back this next part right here, this is where you right back to full throttle right there. So that's this point. I think most of the speed loss, let's see what the summary is, minus 1.4. So let's go back to the start. Minus 1.282. And before we get back to full throttle, he's lost little less than 2/10. So that's about 2/10 lost there, and then there's another almost a little less than a tenth in the rest here. So I guess I have to say most of the speed was probably lost here on corner entry, on braking, and where you can see not as much speed carried through the corner at the apex there. Okay. And these are getting less significant as I go through, and we'll see how many more I can look at. So this is turn 16, commonly referred to as the Le Mans corner. And let's see what we can find different. All right, so my braking was a little early. His braking is almost dead on as far as the amount of braking, which looks good. It's just slightly later. So let's zoom in on where that is. Actually, before we even get into braking, okay, so there's only a 0.2 mile per hour speed difference, so that's good. We're right about around same speed. So I'm braking just a tiny bit sooner. My line was a little shallow, a little more shallow coming in. I think this is the curbing, coming off the curbing just before turn 19. So as you go between 15 and 16, not 19, 16, between 15 and 16, there's that blue curbing. I think I was probably just a little tighter up on that curbing there. Here it is. All right, so here's the blue curbing. My line's a little tighter on that curb. Looks like I'm giving just some little bit of erratic throttle inputs, trying to get a feel for that. And he actually gets on throttle a little smoother than I do, and gradually, and we actually reached full throttle at about the exact same time. So how do we lose 0.3 or 2.27? You can see the amount of speed that's carried here is fairly significant. The blips here would be shifting, where we shifted. So there's a bit more speed carried at this point, and then as we get out of the corner, it kind of stays above on the amount of speed carried there. You know, 2-3 mile per hour maybe, roughly. So this looks like the point where, let's see what's happening because of the later braking. So because of the later braking, steering inputs are a bit different. I'm not real good at reading these steering angles. It's easier for me to just look at the line. So two things we know just looking at the line is that I ran a tighter line on the preceding apex, and then this apex I ran a tighter line as well. So as we come out of the corner, so that's that apex, and here's the other apex. So I think he just needs to use more curbing there and try to carry just a little bit more speed. And it's amazing how just a couple little adjustments to the line can help you carry more speed, and apparently we're accounting for almost 0.3 being the difference there. So, and that's at apex, so that's actually pretty significant for there to be about a 7 mile per hour difference around the apex. So I think he's overslowing the car just a little bit, and because of that, even though we get back to full throttle at about the same time and our speed is different at that same time, he's actually a little bit quicker reaching that curbing there. I don't know, maybe there was a misshift. The amount of speed he's losing on each shift looks like it might be more significant. These first two for sure. So that could be maybe his shifting was just not quite as quick, and so getting those a little quicker could help. But anyway, there's that corner. Let's take a look at Let's take a look at one more. So what we've got here is tower turn. This is the one in my replay that I actually felt like I could have run quicker, a couple tenths quicker. Let's back up to that. Here it is. All right, so approaching tower turn, you want to be tight to the left side of the track there. Let's see what's different. So right off the bat, there's a 5 mile per hour difference, and that's going to be the amount of speed carried off of those prior set of corners is making a pretty big difference on the amount of speed entering this corner. So not quite 5 mile per hour, 4.5 mile per hour, but that's part of the difference. Braking, it looks like I brake a little bit sooner. Other than that, braking, the amount of braking is almost the same. And I'm coming in quicker, and I'm slower after the braking zone. And let's see if we get through at around, as we come into almost the apex, there's a little bit more speed carried there at that point. But then he's actually, as we exit the corner, pretty close on speed. This again, this actually looks like just time lost on shifting. You can see, and I haven't done a lot of comparison in that technique of throttle lift versus clutch, but I don't know, maybe there's something to be said for it, or maybe it's just doing it quick. Maybe it's just the action of shifting just being done faster there. But that looks like a significant amount of time just lost in the shifting process. So let's look between this point. Okay, so we're at minus 1.631 and a mile per hour. Where are we close on speed here? We're only about a mile per hour difference at this point here. And then as we go from shifting, we're 1.63-ish through the shifting zones. Yeah, almost another 2/10 from here to here. And that may just be shifting. There was a little, like, 1 mile per hour speed at that point. But yeah, I'm going to have to say that shifting may be the most significant part, because we're out of the corner, we're back onto the straight. He's only carried 1 mile per hour less speed, and I think he's losing time on upshift. I'll do a quick look at this one here. Pretty big difference here on throttle. Which corner are we on? This is the entry to the very first sector where sector 4, where he loses the most amount of time. So it looks like just before that, maybe setting up for that corner. Looks like I'm getting off throttle a little later, and I'm braking a little bit harder through here. So how do we get into that? We come into the corner with about a 5 mile per hour difference. So this is after turn 1, approaching, going through the key, turn 2, and then turn 3. So the amount of speed that's carried there, that's the difference of what we talked about in turn 1. Getting to the braking zone. Braking, again, is a little more gradual on and off, instead of not quite reaching the threshold as quickly as it could be. And then as we go through the corner, what does the shape of this corner not look like I think it looks? It looks more gradual than I in my mind. but maybe because the apex seems such a sharp apex. So coming into the corner entry before apex, there's more speed carried there, about 7 miles per hour difference. And then at the apex, which is right around here, we're reaching about the same speed. And then I actually have 3 or so mile per hour different speed carried out of the corner. And okay, this is actually an interesting clue into that next sector 4. He's carrying more speed because he's running that wider or that shallower line. He's not slowing the car in order to give it over to the right. So going back to that number 4 sector where we can see the most time lost, where he's running that shallower line, he's actually carrying more speed right here, and that's why he's not getting the car over to the right where it needs to be in preparation to set up that corner. And so you can see that in sector 3. At the end of sector 3, he's actually I don't know, 3 to 4 mile per hour quicker, and where he actually needs to be slowing the car a little bit at that point, where you can see he has more throttle. So he's trying to go fast. He's trying to push it, probably just trying to push the car a little bit too hard, where he needs to actually sacrifice some speed to set up sector 4. All right, so there's a look at some differences in a lap where some time may be gained or lost. So we'll see how that goes across. Give me your feedback.